3 European nations have announced that they will be acknowledging, that they will be formally recognizing Palestine as a state. This is no small thing. The leaders of Norway, Ireland, and Spain, Norway, Ireland, and Spain have stood up and said that they are going to recognize Palestine as a state. And the reason they give is they want to do it for the, quote, sake of peace in the Middle East. Norway's Prime Minister, Jonas Garstor, said on Wednesday that a two-state solution was in Israel's best interest, and the recognition of Palestinian statehood would come as of May 28th. He said, there cannot be peace in the Middle East if there's no recognition. Now, Norway is a particularly interesting case. Of course, if you don't know, Oslo, which is where he gave his speech at, is in Norway. Oslo is not just the place from which the head of state speaks, it's also the home or the site of the Oslo Accords. 1993 was perhaps the most heralded, the most celebrated, also the most dishonest and fundamentally flawed attempt at a two-state solution that we've seen in modern Middle East history, modern global history. And so the fact that the leader of Norway is saying, if we still want to keep a two-state solution together, we got to acknowledge Palestine as a state. Ireland's prime minister basically said the same thing. He was in Dublin, and in Madrid, Pedro Sanchez said the same thing. So Simon Harris, the prime minister of Ireland, Pedro Sanchez, the prime minister of Madrid, said the same. Prime minister of Spain, and he said from Madrid the same thing. There must be a solution that is different. There must be an approach that's different. Prime Minister from Ireland, Prime Minister Harris, said, I'm confident that further countries will join us in taking this important step in the coming weeks. And he's not wrong. We've already heard that the leaders of, what was it? Was it Malta? Who was it? Was it Malta? Yeah, it was Malta and Slovenia have already said they're going to do the same thing. Countries around the world are beginning to stand up and speak up and acknowledge Palestine as a state. This is not merely a symbolic gesture. This is not simply something that's done for political symbolism. This will have a reverberating impact potentially, and I'll tell you why. Number one, it forces nations like the United States and France, powerful nations, Germany, to explain why they're not doing it, to explain why the United States, for example, continues to veto this attempt at the UN Security Council or the UN General Assembly. This is the question that we must ask. It's also important because it begins to help normalize relations at the same time that it begins to isolate Israel for its actions. No country should be isolated because of who they are. Be clear. Israel should not be isolated because it's a Jewish state. Israel should not be isolated, or Israel should not be isolated because they're Jewish. Israel should not be isolated because they're Israel. Israel should be isolated because of their consistent contravention of international law. And it's not just Israel. I'd say that about Saudi Arabia also needs to be isolated. Iran, China, Russia, the United States. We all have done enough dirt maybe to get isolated. We have to ask those questions. But at this moment, with 35,000 plus people killed since October, 78,000 people wounded since October, we have to do something to stop this. And perhaps the hope of a Palestinian state is what people want to see. We see Turkey approved it. Turkey said, look, this is a great decision. Jordan said, this is a great decision. Saudi Arabia, who's been trying to normalize relations with Israel, said, this is a great decision. France said, not yet. France is budging. France said, not yet. What they said is this isn't the right moment, but that the recognition was not, quote, taboo. That means France is coming around. Germany going to be last. US going to be kicking and screaming last too. But everybody else is doing something else. The White House, for its credit, didn't do what they did with the ICC decision the other day. They didn't say, oh, this is evil, everybody's going to hell. What they said is every country can make its own decision on whether to recognize a Palestinian state. But they made it very clear that ain't Joe Biden's position. This is still a big deal. Now, Israel, in case you were wondering, did exactly what Israel does when they are the recipients of news they don't like. They launch out on the offensive. Israel immediately announced that it was recalling its envoys to Ireland and Norway for, quote, urgent consultations. That's tough talk. Foreign Minister Israel Katz said in a statement, "Today I am sending a sharp message to Ireland and Norway. Israel will not go over this in silence." Yo, they be mad. They get big mad. The Israeli Foreign Ministry had earlier posted a video message addressed to Ireland on X saying, "Recognizing a Palestinian state risks turning you into a pawn in the hands of Iran and Hamas," adding the move would, quote, only fuel extremism and instability. Israel also said that plans for Palestinian recognition constitute a, quote, prize for terrorism. So basically they're saying you're rewarding Hamas for October 7th by giving them a state. This is the paternalism. This is the imperial colonial mindset. We're not going to reward you with a state. People have a right to self-determination. It's not up to you to decide who gets self-determination, Israel. It is not up to you to decide who gets a state or not. It's not up to you to decide who gets to be free or not. The very idea that we don't want to reward you for your bad behavior reeks of paternalism. It's literally something you say to a child. The fact of the matter is, if there were a Palestinian state that were free and contiguous and had the capacity for self-determination, which all Palestinian folk do, but it gets undermined by Israeli intervention, by American intervention, by global intervention. If Palestinian people had a single day of self-determination in practice, we wouldn't see what we've been seeing for the last 100 years. But Israel is trying to threaten everybody. They're creating a context where they say basically any country that supports this move is supporting terrorism. So now all of a sudden, if you support Palestinian freedom, you support terrorism, conflating Palestinians with terrorists and Palestinian freedom with freedom to engage in terrorism. It's nasty work, man. It's nasty work what they're doing. But it's also setting people up to be security threats. These are like soft threats, man. Soft threats against the nations, man. It's bad. It's nasty. It's ugly. But it is what it is. It is what it is. What we have to do right now is amplify those voices. The 3 European nations that have recognized Palestinian statehood have to be supported by a chorus of international voices that say the same thing. And by saying the same thing, it becomes normal and natural to make moves like this. This is what Omega here is talking about. She says the response to the ICC told us something huge. That's right. The global community is coming around. The global community hears and sees what's happening. The global community recognizes that Israel is operating with impunity, that Israel is violating international law, that Israel is undermining peace and safety and democracy in the Middle East. Israel ain't the only entity doing that. But Israel's the most powerful one, and Israel's the one that we can rein in because we fund it, we support it, we protect it, we enable it. And we must stop. We must move towards something else.